All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this morning. My name is Grace Manley. I work with the WET Center, and I am here with Stephanie today from Caltech Rocket Fund. Talk to you guys a little bit about what this opportunity could be, how to apply, how to get started, and all of the great things that Rocket Fund has to offer. So Stephanie, if you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, and then if anybody has any questions or comments that they want to ask during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and then we will go through those at the end.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Grace, for the opportunity. And thank you to those who've turned up for this morning's meeting. I'm Stephanie Yanchinski, Director of the Entrepreneurial Programs at the Resnick Sustainability Institute at Caltech, and we oversee the Rocket Fund on behalf of our membership. Okay, one thing I want to emphasize is that we are a fast, flexible, and free, as it happens, clean tech source of funding. So that's a theme that I'm going to emphasize time and again about how we're a bit different from, in fact, many other grant programs that are out there already. Okay, next slide. So how are we different? And what's our role in the crowded ecosystem that now supports clean tech funding? So if you click on the first, so today especially, it is certainly possible to find some startup funding. Either if you're still part of a university, you can find research funding that can take you up to a certain point in technology development. Friends and families always, and some accelerator programs will actually provide early stage funding, the type of funding to get you started. Click again. If you're lucky, if your technology seems to prove out, then you can jump to receiving a bigger slice of the funding called bridge funding from certainly some government commercialization programs like SBIR, from the innovation clusters, of which WET is part of the Blue Tech Valley cluster, from incubators that have attached them these days, investment funds, and from some utility programs, although that is still problematic. They tend to prefer technologies that are proven in the marketplace. Next, click. Of course, if you can secure the bridge funding, you can prove that your technology works in the real world, then equity financing comes from venture capital. And then finally, with that, you'll attract customers, and revenue growth means you're on your way. The problem is, and if you do the last click, is that crucial stage 2, where you need support funding to really validate your prototype with customers. This is sometimes called the valley of death, where a lot of companies, small companies, vulnerable companies actually, unfortunately, die because they can't find that kind of funding. That's what we support. Next slide. Okay. So these are the benefits for applying to the Rocket Fund, and it shows how we're different. And I mentioned earlier that we're fast, flexible, and free. We really want to help early stage companies de-risk their technology to the point where a potential customer or a potential investor says, you've got something that works in the real world, now let's talk. So we're fast. We address the fact that you as a vulnerable company need funding right away. Sometimes we can actually be a source of bridge funding to the next stage where you're applying for, let's say, an SBIR grant, or maybe even securing some very early pre-seed stage of funding. From the time of applying to the time of getting the money is approximately 5 months. Sometime this year it's going to be faster, it's going to be 4 months. We're flexible because we support your strategic goals. We don't have an overarching agenda like some of the government grants need to have. As long as you're within our mission, as long as you serve our mission that's attached to the Rocket Fund. And we're free, non-equity. It's a grant program, and there's certainly no IP required. I've already said that we fund the earliest, riskiest stage of the Valley of Death. That is actually, if you're familiar with the TRL levels, which I'll talk about a bit later, but even if you are still TRL level 4, meaning you've completed a lab scale or garage scale prototype, we can help design the prototype that would move you into TRL 5 and 6. I've already talked about the earliest, riskiest stage of Valley of Death, de-risking technology for customers. And we also say that we fund smart funds. We provide smart funds for items that are not covered by other grant programs. I'll touch on those with a little bit more detail a bit later. And that's important to know because actually when you start applying for these bigger grants, which we, by the way, welcome, we're glad to be able to leverage that kind of money, you'll find that certain things like equipment purchase, for instance, is not covered by an SBIR grant. And that can be problematic for a startup company who really needs the equipment that's part of that early grant program to continue on. And number 8 is the ask can be negotiable. What that means is that you'll see that you can actually talk to us afterwards. We've got a list of things that we typically fund. But if you come to us and say, look, I'd like to fund an extension of this, then we're certainly willing to talk. Next slide. So these are the members. You can see that we have loyal support from California utilities. Southern California Edison is our biggest partner, but also we have 2 municipality utilities, LAWP, SMUD, San Diego Gas and Electric is also a partner of SoCal Gas. I do want to draw your attention to 3 partners, or actually they're 2 in a way. The channel partnerships that we have with the IN2 IN2 Wells Fargo program and the Shell Game Changer program. Those offer additional funding sources through our channel relationship. And also the Electric Power Research Institute, we have a deep partnership with them that goes back to actually the inception of the Rocket Fund, where you can actually partner with them to apply for major, especially California Energy Commission grants. So those can all provide additional sources of funding that will augment what you get from the Rocket Fund. And in the case of the utilities, we've had it happen where companies actually can quadruple the funding that they get from us by simply partnering with one of the utilities. The utilities have actually said if you get a Rocket Fund grant, they will quadruple what you get through matching funds. Next slide. As you can see, we partner with all the major state-run partnerships. We have a particularly close relationship with the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator simply because we share geographic proximity, but Cleantech San Diego, and of course, what should be added there is Blue Tech Valley. We've had this partnership going now since your technology cluster's inception. Next slide. Our technology advisory committee is 30 plus. We have our utility partners. They each provide, in fact, up to 3 reviewers from different sectors, different interests. So you're going to be seen by a wider variety of people from the utilities than you would think normally. We have Electric Power Research Institute. We have the national labs. Actually, they send participation. We're particularly proud of the people that come from ARPA-E because they can provide sizable funding for your technology advancement in advance to actually going commercial. We have 4 investors that sit on our panel as well. They've been with us for quite a few years, and they are interested in seeing early stage technologies that they can perhaps support in a pre-seed kind of round. Breakthrough Energy needs no explanation. We have successful entrepreneurs that have set up and run businesses. They may not have a technical background, but they certainly know a good business opportunity when they see it. We have a patenting legal firm that, by the way, if you want some initial advice about patenting, this particular legal firm is prepared to offer Rocket Fund candidates a bit of time to be able to talk over your technology and whether it's patentable or what would be the best patent strategy you might have. And then we have subject matter experts from academia. Next slide. Okay, the Rocket Fund business model, if you like, has been quite successful. And that is because we capture and support companies at that early risky stage, but that have tremendous promise. So this 200 million plus, we know is an underestimate because we have to really capture a lot of the information that is still private. We're putting together a research investigation that will really capture the final number, but that's an astonishing leverage on the $1.6 million that we've actually put into Rocket Fund Awards. Next slide. These are some of the companies that we funded most recently, I would say. And of the 42 companies that we've funded to date, 37 are still in business. That's an astonishing kind of record, certainly in comparison to investment companies or even companies that are supported by other government grants. So smart funding at the right time can make a huge difference. Next slide. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of what the Rocket Fund does do. So I've already mentioned that our sweet spot, I would say, is TRL 5 to 6 plus, I would say. But if you are still at TRL 4, you're still in the lab or the garage, and you want to move to TRL 5 and begin building that prototype, we fund designing it, iterating it, and installing it. So I just want to make that very clear. As far as manufacturing readiness level is concerned, what we look for there is more a concept of how you will get it manufactured. We know that it would be surprising if you had already developed the manufacturing process when you come to a Rocket Fund. Next slide. Okay, our priorities are, you can read yourself on this slide. What we find in the past has been particularly helpful to companies is the funding of certification and lab testing or validation compliance. We found that that can make a dramatic difference, in fact, to a company's attention getting, if you like, from customers. So one company, I'm going back a bit in time now, and of course they wouldn't have told me this, but they were close to going under. But when they were able to actually certify their device, then they literally got about 5 customers that were lining up saying, let's talk. I've already talked about equipment and parts purchase that is not covered by government grants often. And the other thing is consulting help. Often when you're developing a new technology, you find that it's really hard to understand or to be able to envisage how it's going to, what kind of engineering is going to have to happen in order to make it scalable and then ultimately manufacturable. And we provide the kind of consulting help that can help you through that. Next slide. This rather busy slide talks about or points to the 5 tracks that we fund. We ask you to self-select which track you want to be considered in, but we do reserve the right to be able to move you around if we think, in fact, you'd have a better chance in another track. So if you have any questions, though, as you're putting together your application, don't hesitate and get in touch with me. My role is to advise you on your application right up until March 3rd when it's due. So certainly the questions about which track would be best for you, I'm happy to help you with. Next slide. So it's already open, of course. It closes at midnight on March 3rd. Now, it's a 3-stage process. The initial stage is a screening process. Basically, our team looks for technology focus, whether it's in scope or out of scope, whether the company is perhaps a bit too early, they're still in the applied R&D phase, or too late. In other words, they're just looking for a product extension. That's not something we support. And whether they filled the application form out correctly. Most of the companies that apply get through that process into the semifinal stage, which I'll go into in a bit. And then, of course, there's a final stage where you will present in person, although, of course, it's online in Zoom. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I've already talked about the time frame. An important point is that unlike other grants that require that, first of all, a long kind of discussion period, they may, in the case of a California state grant, wait to be approved at a a business planning meeting that's scheduled with other agenda items. That can take some time. No problem. We certainly don't want to criticize because those are major grants that need that kind of time, if you like, to settle. But we're quite happy to give you all of the money up front. There's a bit of a negotiation period where we talk about your goals and the time frame, but we have no problem with paying that upfront that can get you started. A product timeline, typically 9 to 12 months from receiving the award, but we've also held the money for up to 12 months when, let's say, negotiations take a bit longer about your demonstration site. And we certainly repeat this. I know there's some people that might be on the call that have applied before. Certainly welcome repeat applications. And we funded actually companies in their second or third application, but we would look some progress, if you like, from your last application. Next slide. Okay, what we look for. Now, it's in the application phase, this is going to be the short form, of, if you like, of the due diligence form that you'll fill out for the semi-final stage of the application. So we look for third-party validation technology. I'm asked about that often. What that consists of is it could be a patent application or awarded patent. It could be a paper published. It could be your own data. It could be a letter of support from your prospective customer or partner for demonstration. And just to be clear what that would look like, the best letters of support are those that say, we've looked at the technology, we've had our tech team review it, and we think it has tremendous promise for us, and we'd be willing to work with this company to demonstrate its value. Competitive value proposition, in other words, what kind of niche you will be able to carve out with your technology in your competitive marketplace. Market size, we do ask for SAM and TAM estimates, but we really want to see that your beachhead assessment of where you're going to penetrate the market is based on a good business model and a good path to commercialization. And we can support that. That's our whole goal, is to support you to de-risk your technology, to get to that beachhead market so you can start earning your revenues and become independent. As I mentioned before, customer will demonstrate, or a test lab could do. What I mean by that is, let's say that you receive one of the voucher awards to do some testing with NREL, and they go through the program with you, the process with you, and they say at the end of it that this technology is good, and is actually in its current iteration that we've developed with in partnership, can be commercially interesting. That's the gold standard, if you like, of lab testing. And then stage use of rocket funds, and I can talk about that a little bit later. So that's what the application form looks like. I would say try to keep it as short as possible, short and to the point. We respond better to those that show clear thinking behind their application. Next slide. So stage 2 semifinals, you're going to fill out a form that looks like this. It's basically, an extension or an enhancement of your application form. So, and it will ask for a lot of information, quite honestly, that you are applying for other grant programs. So you can literally almost cut and paste what you're saying on other grant forms into ours. So you can read this for yourself, the technology innovation. I would say here that a lot of applications spend a lot of time describing the technology in great detail, but they're short on what this means in the marketplace, how the innovation is going to carve out its own niche in the marketplace. So try to balance describing the innovation against what that innovation means in terms of a product. Manufacturing commercialization. We want you to describe the manufacturing process, knowing full well that this is going to be a projection. It's not going to be your final manufacturing process, but just need to show us that you've actually done some serious thinking about how you would get it done. So would you manufacture it yourself? Would you outsource it? Would you license your first product, for instance, and then build on the revenue you get to actually set up the next generation product that you'll manufacture? I would certainly want to see that your partners are there already, that you're at least in discussion about how you would scale up with these partners, how you would fill the supply chain. And the path to commercialization, that's important again, but we're looking for your strategic approach and the beginnings of discussion with people that might help you on that path to commercialization. We know at this stage that a lot of this will not be finalized, but we just want to see that you've begun conceptualizing it as part of your business model. And then impact on climate and diversity. Impact on climate these days, it can be any of those things: energy savings, carbon dioxide mitigation, decarbonization, water use reduction or efficiencies is something also that we consider. And then when we turn to diversity, we do look for diversity in leadership, meaning that you paid some attention to trying to bring in people to lead your company from different backgrounds, different geographic areas, different strata of society, and that there are perhaps some community benefits to your technology. Now, we don't want you to warp yourself out of shape and try to be unrealistic about applying your innovation, if you like, when it becomes commercial to disadvantaged communities. But if it does address those needs, then by all means, bring it up. Okay, next slide. Stage 3. Just to finish off with stage 2, by the way, what happens there, you complete a due diligence form that is submitted to our technology advisory committee that I've already mentioned. They score it and then come and meet at a meeting where we sit down and we go through the applications and decide at that meeting who will be in the finals. Okay, stage 3, this is where the selected finalists present in person to a review committee, which consists of many of the same people, in fact, that have seen you at the semifinal stage, but much more focusing on our utilities. They bring in extra people actually to review the companies at the final stage. Cleantech industry investors and government agencies. Again, some of the same people that that will have already seen your application. And I want to say that the difference between the semifinal and the final is this: the semifinal really takes a deep dive into your technology, whether it's truly innovative, whether it has commercial potential, such things as your business model and your path to commercialization, and just the general over high level look at what you're presenting to us as a story. But in the final presentation, we're going to look much more closely at such things as your business model, whether we think it's viable. We're going to look more closely at the team. We would expect for you to be able to list your team members. And by the way, you don't have to be a big company. That's not what we're looking for. What we do recommend, though, is that if you're a 2-person team or a 3-person team, that they show us that you have in your group of advisors people who can actually supply the needs of extending your company and growing your technology. So they could be advisors from the cleantech industry that you're targeting. They could be advisors from, let's say, NREL. They could be advisors from investments groups that are actually looking at you already. So that's important for us to see. And then I've already said we look for technology validation. In this case, we might look for performance data. It's not necessary in the first 2 stages, but certainly you can enhance that descriptor when you come to present in person. Clearly articulated customer and market focused plan of attack. We'll look for you to be able to articulate that in person, much as you would do in front of, let's say, sitting down with a potential partner or sitting down with an investor group. So we'd want to see that you can actually describe it clearly and answer our questions. We'll look much more closely at the outline of your plans for field trials. That's something that we really examine very closely to see how far you've got in those discussions, whether in fact that your target partner lines up, if you like, with your business model, with your initial beachhead market. We'll also look closely at the use of funds. This year, we actually increased our level of award from a 75 to 100K to include 100K. You can stage your ask in two ways, because I'm asked about this all the time. You can break it up, let's say, into buying different elements that are needed for the demonstration. So it could be equipment purchase for, let's say, 50K. It could be starting certification for 75K. So you can break it up that way, or you can simply say, look, in order to fund the full demonstration, we want to make a start with stage 1 that will take, let's say, 25 or 50K. Stage 2 gets us 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way with 75K. And then 100K will pay for it all. So there's two ways that you can look at it when you do your proposal. We do look for a manufacturing plan, including a cost analysis. It's kind of standard now that this kind of grant proposal will include maybe a techno-economic analysis. That's no longer something that is regarded as late stage. In fact, we kind of look for it ourselves in an earlier stage application. Again, we know that it's theoretical. We know that it'll change a lot. We know, in fact, with all of this, that you'll be making a lot of pivots. We don't have a problem with that. Even if you have to pivot, let's say, after getting an award, you go in one direction with a partner and you're finding out that, in fact, that a better opportunity lies in another direction and that you want to use the Rocket Fund money for that new direction, not a problem. You just come back to us and you negotiate that. And then don't be afraid in the final stage to do an ask. You know, how can the Rocket Fund help? I've already mentioned the utility technical support that we can provide perhaps through our partners. Also, for instance, the Electric Power Research Institute often will come back to us and say, look, we want to apply for this California Energy Commission grant, a bridge grant that's going to offer maybe a couple of $1 million to further develop the technology into a product. We'd like to partner with one of your Rocket Fund companies. So what happens there is we put together a list of referrals after we've reviewed your due diligence reports, after reviewed sometimes your presentations, and we make recommendations where there's a good fit and where we think the team is strong enough to be able to work with EPRI on these grant proposals. And by the way, EPRI is quite happy to have the Rocket Fund company take a lead. And they'll provide needed technical support as well as administration support to be able to make the grant work for you. Next slide. So that's about all I want to say about the Rocket Fund. These are the contacts. By all means, as I've said already, you can get in touch with me before March 3rd. Don't hesitate. I'm happy to go through your application with you and give advice. So with that, I'd like to throw it open for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was great and very informative. So we do have a couple of questions. I will see. How much of the information we share is going to be made publicly available? Are there any options to keep submissions confidential?
Okay, it's a great question, and I'm glad that that came up. So you have to assume that all 30 Technology Advisory Committee members might see your information. Okay, that's number one. And certainly the review board and the finals will see your information. But having said that, it's kept confidential to that group. And when you submit the due diligence form, it goes into the Caltech box system, which is firewalled substantially by the Caltech system. Believe me, I've had to work with that, and we do that. We brought it back away from the public box system into the Caltech box system specifically to protect you, so that the information could not be hacked, if you like, in any kind of dangerous way. We don't sign NDAs because, quite frankly, that's too time-consuming and they're not particularly useful.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to know if innovations outside of the USA are possible to have grants or get rocket funds for a pre-seed, yes, for a startup, yes, in the pre-seed step.
We support it. We have supported companies that are based outside of the United States. And the technology is being partly developed there, partly with our help. The caveat to that is that you should be wanting to set up a presence in the United States. So you don't have to move your company, but that you want to set up a sizable, let's say, office that's going to actually establish a new market, or maybe do research and development, or do the demonstration. Especially if you want to do the demonstration in California, we're happy to support that, help you grow your business, but it has to have some US-based interest. And quite frankly, most companies want to do that anyway, so it's not a hard requirement.
Perfect. Is there any tech or IP transfer to Caltech required?
Not at all. No, we don't require it. We don't look for it. In fact, that would make it very awkward for us.
Yeah. So what if they wanted to introduce a new technology, something that's not quite established? Is there a way to kind of go about doing that?
If I interpret that question right, is that if you're saying our technology is so new that it's going to be, at this stage, we're just really discovering what its potential might be, do we support that, as opposed to what I've been describing where you have a clearer direction? And we do. We have something called the Moonshot. That's our 5th track, and specifically for very new technologies that probably have a longer ramp-up time than the other later stage companies with their technologies. And we can help you probably find your direction, if you like, through our support. Perfect. The one thing I have to say that we don't support, by the way, is more applied R&D. We do expect that you've reached the point of proof of concept where you think you've got something, but you haven't quite got to the point where you can say for sure this is the commercial direction that we want to go in. So if we can help you build the next iteration of that lab scale that will help prove that, we're willing to look at it. Yep.
Perfect. Are there any other questions or comments? Either chat them in, use the Q&A, or even raise your hand and I can allow you to talk if you'd like to have a little bit of actual dialogue here. So I have one. If they're in the process of kind of filling out the application, you might have touched on this, and they're a little bit stuck on what to say or do next, is there any way to reach out or contact somebody to kind of get some advice as they go through the application?
Absolutely. I've made an offer before, and that is contact me. Send me an email. Just say, can you help advise me on how to fill out the application form? Happy to talk. Happy to review what you're providing too, which as far as you've got.
Perfect. What if the tech is quite proven? We just need help getting funds to bring it to market.
That's fine. Sure. We've funded companies that have received up to $3 million in investment. That, by the way, this year is our cap, but even that is proving to be a bit flexible because right now we're in a Cleantech funding bubble, as you probably know. So pre-seed investment can actually reach up to 10 or 12 million, as we've seen. So we're prepared to be flexible on that. And basically what they wanted, with their $3 million investment was to be able to establish that amazing opportunity in California to demonstrate that their technology would work in this setting, in this geography. So happy to support that as well. And that, I would say, is what, TRL 6+, maybe, almost at TRL 7. So we've supported that too.
All right, perfect. So right now we're getting a lot of thank yous for the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw back up this last slide just so people can copy down any of the contact and emails, the application, everything, so that we can have this be shown again, get all that relevant information down. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to reach out to Stephanie. You can also reach out to the Wet Center. We are happy to help. But thank you everybody for joining us. If there are no more questions, let me check Q&A again.
And I will add one point before we say, first of all, I'll say thank you to everybody for coming. But I just mentioned that there was an investment cap of $3 million nominally, but there is no cap on any kind of research funding that you've received. So again, we've looked seriously at companies that have received many millions of ARPA-E money, for instance. And that's not a problem. Again, it's a good leverage factor for our investment.
Then I will paste that into the chat for everybody as well, that last slide, just so there's some clickable links and it might be easier for people to copy down. So that last slide is now pasted into the chat so everyone can grab that information there. Thank you, Jared, for that. All right, well, we'll stick around for a couple minutes in case anybody has any straggling questions, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for this great presentation. I hope we see some good applications come from this group, and
oh yeah,
just love seeing what comes from Rocket Fund.
I don't know who's out there, but I just want to say that there's a real opportunity for anybody who's involved in irrigation, energy efficiency on the farm, microbiome. We haven't seen enough applications in that area, and we are very, very open to considering those. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay, perfect. So we'll this webinar was recorded, so we will also post this webinar on our channels and continue to promote this information session for anybody who wasn't able to join live. So we'll still give people the opportunity to learn and get some information before that March 3rd at midnight deadline. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. But all right, well, thank you everybody
I was pausing because I've been asked, no, I've been asked whether it's 11:59 of, March 3rd, or is it actually the next minute after? That's why we always say 11:59.
Exactly. Yep.
Midnight,
We've got,
yeah.
I like 11:59 more than the end of the day, because end of days varies a lot more. So
yeah.
But all right, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Stephanie, and
Sure.
we'll hang out for a minute if there's any follow-up questions.